Love without attachment. What the Stoics taught about freedom in relationships. Have you ever been afraid to love? Afraid of losing someone you care about deeply? Or maybe you've wondered why love, something that should bring us peace, so often turns into anxiety, jealousy, attachment, and even pain. For the Stoics, the problem was never love itself. It was blind attachment. They teach us that true love doesn't cling, doesn't suffocate, and doesn't demand control. Mature love, according to Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, is the kind that flows freely, fully aware that everything we hold dear is temporary. If you want to learn how to love deeply without becoming a prisoner of fear, stay with us until the end. We live in a time of fragile connections and, paradoxically, of deep emotional attachments. We seek happiness in relationships, yet often find ourselves caught in cycles of control, fear of loss, and unrealistic expectations. What should be a source of mutual growth becomes a quiet emotional prison, built on insecurity and the illusion of permanence. Stoic philosophy, however, offers a radically different lens through which to understand love. For great thinkers like Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca, true love is not based on possession, but on freedom. It's not fueled by the desire to control the other, but by the virtue of embracing impermanence, even in people. Attachment arises when we confuse the value of affection with the need to hold on at all costs. We suffer because we believe we cannot live without the other. We forget that everything in life, including relationships, is transient. When love is shaped by Stoic wisdom, it becomes a practice of presence, of admiration for who the other is, not who we wish they were. This video is an invitation to rethink your relationships through the lens of inner freedom. We'll explore how Stoicism can transform the way you connect with others, whether romantic, familial, or friendships, into something more conscious, balanced, and liberating. You'll discover why true love begins with emotional self-reliance, how to care deeply without becoming emotionally dependent, and why, according to the Stoics, real love does not imprison, it sets us free. Prepare to see love with new eyes, wiser, calmer, and stronger. 1. What is love according to the Stoics? Between virtue and freedom. When we think of love, the image that often comes to mind is one of passion, emotional intensity, and deep connection, sometimes accompanied by promises of forever. But for the Stoics, love is not about emotional dependency or possessiveness. Love, in their view, is above all a practice of virtue. Seneca described love as a higher form of friendship, not something that enslaves us, but something that strengthens us. It is a connection built on admiration for the other's character and a mutual desire for moral growth. To love in this context is not to lose yourself in another person. It is to see their worth without losing your own center. Epictetus warned us, love others as you would hold a delicate clay cup, knowing it can break at any moment. Everything is fragile. Everything is impermanent. To love someone, he said, is to recognize that they, too, are subject to change, to distance, to loss. Therefore, we must learn to love not by clinging, but by appreciating. Marcus Aurelius echoed this by reminding us that all things in the universe follow a natural order, including relationships. Loving someone deeply means wanting what is best for them, even if that one day includes a life apart from you. Love cannot depend on permanence because permanence is never guaranteed. This view may seem cold at first, but it's profoundly liberating. It shifts love out of the realm of fantasy and into the reality of the present moment. It teaches us to love without illusions, without trying to mold the other into our ideal, and most importantly, without placing our peace in someone else's hands. Stoic love is an act of inner freedom. It is love with clarity. It is the ability to look someone in the eye and say, I do not need to possess you to value you. I do not need to control you to care for you. That kind of love does not imprison, it inspires. If you've ever suffered in love, maybe it wasn't because you loved too much, but because you expected too much. Stoic philosophy invites us to replace expectation with appreciation, neediness with virtue, fear with awareness. In the end, to love like a Stoic is not to love less, it's to love better. 2. Why do we confuse love with attachment? Perhaps one of the greatest sources of suffering in relationships is this quiet, almost automatic confusion between love and attachment. We believe that to love someone means wanting to be with them all the time, feeling jealous, fearing their loss, and doing everything we can to keep them close. But is that truly love? Or is it simply disguised attachment? For the Stoics, genuine love is born from virtue and rational choice. Attachment, on the other hand, comes from desire, especially the desire for permanence, and that's where the problem lies. Life, by its nature, is impermanent, and when we try to hold on to something that cannot be held, we suffer. We suffer because we place our happiness in things we cannot control, someone else's behavior, their decisions, their time, their feelings. Attachment is fueled by the illusion of possession. When we say my partner, my person, or my love, we often forget that the other is not an extension of our ego. They are a free individual, and Stoicism reminds us that anything outside our control, including another person's heart, can never be our foundation for peace. To love is not to bind someone with invisible chains. It's not to smother them with expectations. Love doesn't need to shout, demand, cling, or fear. Attachment does all that, because it lives in fear. Fear of loss, fear of loneliness, fear of not being loved back. That's why we confuse the two. Because attachment often looks like intensity. It seems like passion, like devotion. But deep down, it's loaded with anxiety, insecurity, and a constant need for reassurance. True love, on the other hand, is quiet and steady. It's a calm and continuous yes, not dependent on constant presence or daily proof. Epictetus reminds us that everything we love is subject to change, including people. That's why to truly love is to accept impermanence. Not to pull away, but to come closer with greater awareness. When we understand that nothing really belongs to us, we begin to value what we have while we have it. We confuse love with attachment because we've been taught to fear loneliness, to idealize others, and to seek our own completeness in someone else. Stoicism breaks that cycle. It invites us to see love as a shared act of freedom, not mutual captivity. To love with wisdom is to recognize that the other person is a choice, not a necessity. And the more we free ourselves from attachment, the more room we make for love to truly flourish. 3. How the fear of loss fuels toxic relationships. The fear of loss is one of the most deeply human emotions. It arises from the awareness, often unspoken, that anything we love can be taken away from us. And while this fear is natural, when left unexamined, it quietly becomes the fuel for toxic patterns in relationships. How often do jealousy, control, emotional demands, and anxiety stem from this simple fear of losing someone? Not from what's actually happening, but from what might happen. This is precisely where the Stoics bring one of their most powerful lessons. Do not suffer in advance. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you suffer more in imagination than in reality. When fear of loss takes over, we stop living in the present moment of love and begin projecting a catastrophic future. To avoid that imagined outcome, we tighten our grip on the relationship. We begin to micromanage love. We seek constant reassurance. We create conditions, tests, and rules. We sometimes even sabotage the relationship just to prove it's still alive. Is that love? No, it's fear. And fear is never a solid foundation for any healthy bond. Toxic relationships rarely begin with bad intentions. They often begin with unhealed insecurity, with the belief that, if I lose this person, I won't know who I am. This emotional dependency is precisely what the Stoics challenge. Epictetus reminds us that only those who place their peace within themselves are truly free. When we learn to face the possibility of loss, we stop being slaves to anxiety. We stop using manipulation and start creating space for clarity. The fear of loss takes away the best part of love, the freedom to choose each other daily, not out of need, but out of admiration and respect. When we turn love into a contract, a comfort zone, or a control mechanism, it loses its vitality, and slowly both people begin to wither under the pressure. Stoicism invites us to reverse the logic. Instead of trying to guarantee the other will never leave, We must become the kind of person who remains whole even if they do. That's not coldness. That's maturity. That's the foundation of real connection, built not on neediness, but on inner strength. To love well requires courage, the courage to lose, the courage to remain whole in absence, and above all, the courage to stop confusing love with possession, safety with control, closeness with dependency. 4. The role of emotional autonomy in true love. True love, according to the Stoics, doesn't arise from one incomplete soul seeking another half to feel whole. It emerges from two emotionally self-reliant individuals who choose to walk together, not out of fear, but out of freedom. And at the core of this kind of love lies something many modern relationships lack: emotional autonomy. But what exactly is emotional autonomy? It is the ability to recognize, manage, and take responsibility for your own emotions without projecting them onto others. It means not expecting your partner to constantly fix, calm, or validate you. It means not placing the burden of your self-worth or happiness on the relationship. In a healthy love, each person owns their emotional state and shares it with honesty, not blame. To the Stoics, true freedom begins within. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that mastery is what allows us to love without losing ourselves. When we're emotionally autonomous, love doesn't feel like a roller coaster. We're not fine when our partner is, and shattered when they're distant. We remain anchored in our own stability. A lack of emotional autonomy creates dependency, jealousy, emotional volatility, and a constant fear of abandonment. It also feeds the illusion that we're only whole when in a relationship. And that illusion is what Stoicism exists to dismantle. Emotional autonomy is the antidote to toxic attachment. With it, we can admire and appreciate someone deeply, without needing them to complete us. We can say, "I love you," without it meaning, "I can't live without you." And we can be fully present in a relationship without sacrificing our identity. Even Marcus Aurelius, an emperor surrounded by power and politics, understood that the only true authority we have is over our own mind. And when we cultivate that inner authority, we become emotionally sustainable. That means we can love, and love well, without collapsing under the weight of external fluctuations. In a healthy, Stoic-inspired love, no one disappears to keep the other happy. There's room for us, but never at the cost of the individual I. Because as the Stoics taught, the most important bond you'll ever build is the one you cultivate with yourself. Loving someone without emotional autonomy is like building a house on sand. It is fragile and unstable. But loving with emotional strength is like building on rock. It's steady, intentional, and lasting. 5. How to practice detachment without becoming indifferent. When people hear the word detachment, they often imagine coldness, emotional distance, or even selfishness. But in the Stoic worldview, detachment is not the absence of love. It is one of the highest and most conscious forms of love. It's entirely possible and deeply necessary to detach without becoming indifferent. And that is one of Stoicism's most sophisticated lessons. Seneca taught that we should love as if we're ready to let go. That doesn't mean we devalue the people in our lives. It means we love them with awareness, not with dependency. Detachment, when practiced wisely, allows love to breathe, to expand, and to flow without being suffocated by anxiety or the desperate need for permanence. Picture yourself holding a small bird in your hands. If you squeeze too tightly, you harm it. If you open your hands too much, it flies away. But if you hold it with lightness and care, it may choose to stay. Detachment is that gentle hold, and it's not cold, it's deeply respectful. Indifference is not caring. Detachment is caring with clarity. Through detachment, we learn to love in the present moment, knowing what we have today might not be with us tomorrow. It teaches us to be grateful instead of entitled, to admire instead of control, and above all, to accept impermanence without closing our hearts. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that everything we love is on loan from nature, our family, our friends, our partners. Nothing truly belongs to us. When we internalize this truth, we stop fearing loss and begin appreciating presence. Of course, Detachment doesn't erase the pain of separation, grief, or the end of a relationship, but it equips us to face these transitions with maturity, resilience, and composure. It's the difference between suffering with resistance and suffering with dignity. In Stoic practice, detachment is not about disconnecting from others. It's about not disconnecting from yourself. It's the ability to remain whole even when what you love changes or fades. It's the wisdom of saying, I love you, but I don't need to own you. I care for you deeply, but I don't depend on you to feel at peace. Because there is no real love without some level of detachment. Only those who are ready to let go are truly present while love is here. And that presence, grounded, free, and conscious, is the deepest connection we can ever offer another person. 6. Why real love doesn't demand possession, only presence. One of the greatest misconceptions we inherit about love is the belief that, in order to truly love someone, we must possess them. It's so embedded in our language. My partner, my person, my love. But for the Stoics, real love never seeks ownership. It seeks only presence, presence that neither controls nor depends on control. Epictetus urged us to treat everything we value as if it were something borrowed from the universe. Nothing is truly ours, not even the people we hold most dear. That isn't a pessimistic view, but a liberating one. Because once we stop trying to own love, we begin to appreciate it more deeply, with reverence, not fear. Possession breeds anxiety. It creates unrealistic expectations, dependency, and constant worry. We feel we must secure the other person, lock in their affection, prevent them from changing. And in doing so, we start to shrink the relationship into something transactional, conditional, and suffocating. Presence, however, is different. Presence asks for no promises of forever. It asks only for honesty in the now. It's the look in someone's eyes that says, I'm here, fully, freely. No invisible contract. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that to live well is to live in the present. The same applies to love. True presence doesn't need guarantees. It needs commitment to the moment. Commitment that is renewed each day, not out of obligation, but out of free will and shared intention. When love is built on possession, it becomes fragile, because it's rooted in illusion. But when love is built on presence, it becomes strong, because it's grounded in mutual respect, truth, and freedom. It doesn't demand constant proof, nor does it collapse when space is needed. This Stoic-inspired love is not a prison. It's a choice made repeatedly, not because we're afraid to be alone, but because we genuinely value the other person as they are. We don't love someone hoping they'll never change. We love them while knowing they inevitably will. And maybe the most powerful thing we can say to someone isn't you remain. It's I see you, I'm with you. That in itself is more lasting and more loving than any attempt at ownership. 7. How to deal with the pain. When love changes or ends. Few experiences cut as deeply as watching love change or end. The person is alive, sometimes even still near, but what once connected you no longer fits. The gaze feels distant, the rhythm is off, the silence grows heavier, and then comes the pain, the kind that doesn't leave visible wounds, but feels like the ground beneath you is collapsing. Stoicism doesn't teach us to suppress this pain. On the contrary, it teaches us to face it with courage, clarity, and above all, dignity. Epictetus reminds us, it's not events that disturb us but our judgments about them. When a relationship ends, what hurts isn't only the absence of the person. It is the death of the imagined future, the loss of promises, the collapse of illusions. We suffer not just because something ended, but because we believed it shouldn't have. The Stoics bring us back to reality. They invite us to embrace impermanence as the natural order of life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Whatever happens, happens as it should." This isn't fatalism, it's wisdom. Accepting that relationships evolve, fade, or end helps us grow through the experience instead of becoming defined by it. To grieve the end of love is human, but to remain stuck in grief is a choice, even if unconscious. Stoic philosophy offers a tool, premeditatio malorum, visualizing what could go wrong, not to live in fear, but to prepare the heart. It won't erase pain, but it will lessen the shock, and over time, pain transforms into insight. The end of love forces us to return to ourselves, to rediscover who we are without that person, to rebuild the inner home we once outsourced to a relationship. This is painful, but it's also strengthening. Seneca wrote, "Time heals what reason cannot, and yet reason, tempered by philosophy, can help make time more bearable." From a Stoic perspective, we learn to thank love for what it gave, instead of resenting it for what it didn't become. We begin to understand that relationships, like seasons, have cycles. They begin, grow, change, and sometimes end. Our virtue lies in how we meet each phase. Love may end, but your capacity to love does not have to die with it. In fact, it can emerge from the ashes stronger, calmer, wiser. 8. Why love requires courage, not dependency. Many people mistake love for emotional dependency. They believe to love is to need, to feel incomplete without the other, to give endlessly even when it costs them their own peace. But this idea, often romanticized in songs, movies, and social media, is the very opposite of what the Stoics considered true love. To the Stoics, love is an act of bravery. Bravery not just to feel deeply but to remain whole. Bravery to be fully present without clinging. Bravery to allow the other person to grow, to change, even to walk away, and still stand firmly in who you are. Dependency is born from fear. Fear of loneliness. Fear of inadequacy. Fear of not being loved again. And love that's built on fear becomes anxious, unstable, and exhausting. We demand guarantees. We watch the other person too closely. We try to hold on to something that was never meant to be held so tightly. Epictetus taught, "Freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it." This inner freedom is what allows us to love with maturity. When we know who we are, when we're not searching for someone else to validate our worth, then we're able to give love freely, without control, without desperation. Love requires courage because it opens us to uncertainty. No relationship comes with a lifetime warranty. No "I love you" is a legal contract. And still we choose to love. We choose to trust. We choose to build something fragile and beautiful, even knowing it may break. And courage in love also means the ability to say no, to set boundaries, to preserve your integrity, even within the bond. There's nothing noble about disappearing to make someone else feel whole. There's no virtue in remaining in spaces that diminish you. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, "Live in dignity, even in difficulty." Loving someone and keeping your dignity are not opposites. They're complementary. The strongest love is one in which two people remain themselves and choose each other, not out of need, but out of strength. So the next time you hear that true love means giving your all, ask yourself, am I loving with courage or with fear? Because love rooted in courage doesn't ask you to disappear. It asks you to shine and invites the other to do the same. 9. How to build deep connections without losing your freedom. Many people believe that emotional depth and personal freedom are incompatible, that to connect deeply, we must surrender parts of ourselves, that to strengthen a bond, we must give up independence. But for the Stoics, the truth lies elsewhere. The more inner freedom we cultivate, the deeper our connections can truly be. Stoic freedom is not detachment in the modern cynical sense. It's not emotional coldness or avoidance of intimacy. It's inner sovereignty, the ability to be in a relationship by choice, not out of fear, obligation, or emotional need. And this is what makes love truly powerful. It doesn't depend on chains, but on clarity and commitment. Seneca wrote that true friendship, and by extension, true love, is rooted in virtue, not in utility, not in need, and certainly not in control. When we are with someone by free will, without pressure or emotional fusion, we create a foundation where genuine connection can grow strong and healthy. Relationships like this don't suffocate, they breathe. They don't fear space, because they understand that space doesn't separate people who are truly aligned. On the contrary, it strengthens the bond. It allows each person to grow individually, while continuing to walk together. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that everything in nature seeks harmony, and human nature is both social and free. To love someone deeply does not require abandoning your essence. It requires sharing it honestly, with presence, with self-respect, and with space for both to evolve. Deep connections are not built through control. They are built through presence, through open conversations, through shared silences, through the space to reflect, grow, and return, not out of duty, but out of desire. Freedom within a relationship is not a threat, it's a thermometer. It shows that the love present doesn't depend on possession, but on mutual recognition, the recognition of the other's autonomy and the preservation of your own. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all this is realizing that the freer you are internally, the more capable you become of loving deeply. Because you are not seeking in the other what is missing in you. You are sharing what is abundant. This is the Stoic model of love. Deep without being possessive, committed without being rigid, engaged without being controlling. And that is one of the highest forms of human connection, a bond that elevates, not entangles. 10. The love that liberates. The Stoic view on lasting bonds. After all we've explored, one question remains: what does Stoic love truly look like? If it's not based on attachment, control, or fear of loss, is it still love? The answer is yes. In fact, it might be the purest form of love. For the Stoics, real love does not enslave. It liberates. Seneca once wrote, "Love is the union of two virtues." And in Stoicism, virtue means living in alignment with reason, nature, and moral excellence. When applied to love, this means that loving well is not about fulfilling emotional hunger. It is about showing up with wisdom, character, and freedom. Epictetus taught that we should treat everything in life, including the people we cherish, as if it has been lent to us by nature. That idea can feel uncomfortable, especially in a culture that equates love with permanence. But it is not meant to detach us emotionally. It is meant to deepen our presence and gratitude. To love while knowing we may one day let go is to love more consciously, not less. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that everything follows the natural rhythm of change: beginnings, transformations, endings. Love is no exception. The Stoic approach is not about making love eternal, but about making it true while it lasts. This requires acceptance, humility, and the inner strength to remain open-hearted, even in impermanence. This philosophy teaches us to replace obsession with serenity, need with maturity, fantasy with clarity, to love without losing ourselves, to care deeply without suffocating the other, to walk side by side, not because we can't stand alone, but because we choose to be together. Stoic love is lucid love. It is rooted in character, not control. It is fueled by virtue, not fear. It does not cling, it offers. It does not demand, it honors. It gives both people room to breathe, evolve, and return to one another with intention, not dependence. And perhaps that is the greatest gift of this philosophy, not just the ability to love others better, but to live better, with more balance, with more courage, and with the kind of inner freedom that no ending can ever take away. If this video helped you see love with more clarity, more maturity, and less fear, wait until you discover how the Stoics approached something even more subtle: solitude. Why are we so afraid of being alone? What does Stoicism teach us about being with ourselves, without distractions, without emotional crutches, and without running away? In our next episode, we'll explore how solitude, inner strength, and emotional independence form the foundation for all meaningful relationships, and why the great minds of antiquity believed that learning to be alone is essential to loving well, living well, and never losing yourself in the process. If you're serious about building a stronger mind and a freer heart, you won't want to miss it. If this message resonates with you, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Every reflection here is one more step toward true inner freedom. See you in the next episode, with presence, courage, and clarity.